Hello and welcome back to Process Mining 2023. In this webinar, we will learn about how optimizing the quote-to-cash process can help organizations increase revenue and improve financial stability. And I would like to welcome our speaker, James Henderson, CEO at mindzie, and his colleague, Daniel Hughes, Vice President, who will lead this conversation. James, Daniel, it's over to you now.
Thank you, Anna. James, welcome.
Thank you, Daniel, and welcome to everyone, or good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are.
Yeah, since the vast majority of the attendees here are probably familiar with process and process improvement, I thought it made sense to pick the brain of James Henderson, focusing on tactical benefits and lessons learned from our experiences with customers and his experience at a publicly traded company. We'll talk through process mining, the specific benefits for a business when applying it to the quote-to-cash process, how you get executive buy-in, and other topics that you should consider to ensure your quote-to-cash process improvement project is a success. So let's dive right in. James, let's start with process mining in general. Where are you seeing the highest demand for process mining today?
You know, Daniel, I think what we've seen is historically, if you sort of look at the beginning of process mining, and as some of our other process mining colleagues have probably touched on throughout the earlier sessions, it's really been focused on kind of the largest scale enterprises, you know, the biggest 1% running SAP. But it's been interesting to see over the years that market has really begun to shift and diversify. So we're seeing, you know, that continued interest in those large scale enterprise businesses, but we're also seeing the interest in process mining, process intelligence, and process improvement in general, really expanding into mid-market style businesses, right? These are companies that could have the same or similar challenges to the large businesses and are curious as they see the success and the impact process mining projects have had on the larger business, how they can apply it to their business and benefit. So when we even think about the specific use cases, you know, process mining was really traditionally focused on procure to pay, order to cash. But those have diversified so greatly now, right? You're seeing credit loan application, hire to retire in HR, service tickets and support, IT server provisioning, IoT devices, and even specifically the topic that we're talking about, which is really the original order to cash process, basically expanding into now what we refer to as quote to cash, where you're seeing an even sort of earlier start to that process.
So why do you think demand for process mining is shifting in those ways?
You know, I'd say first and foremost, obviously, we've drinking the Kool-Aid. And as you mentioned earlier, I've personally seen at the previous business I was running the benefits of process improvement projects. But we're in a very interesting time, right? One, we've seen the use cases and the benefits of process mining sort of get promoted across the spectrum, right? To different businesses, different users, and across the globe. But also we're in a time of, you know, let's put it politely and say economic uncertainty, right? Businesses are unsure. Are we going into recession? Are we not going into recession? There's fears around cash flow and working capital from CFOs. So you really have this heightened interest in how do I make my business run better? And ensuring that they want to make the business run better means they really have to start thinking a little bit differently, right? And applying tactics that they maybe didn't before. And process intelligence and process improvement has come to the forefront as part of that, because it allows them this new layer of insight where they really didn't have that before. And then you layer this other macroeconomic factor of labor costs across the globe have really become far more costly than they were in previous years. So if you're looking at how you grow, if you're looking at how you become more efficient, and you're also being burdened with this higher cost of labor, it really forces you to think outside the box and figure out how can we do more with less? How can we scale without necessarily increasing headcount? How can I make the resources that I have available today more efficient and more useful to the business? And all of those things really just put a laser focus on understanding your processes and figuring out how you make them work better.
So it sounds like there's a lot of business benefits to improving quote to cash. What makes quote to cash a good candidate for process mining projects in particular?
So I think quote to cash is probably one of my favorites. And reason being is that first and foremost, it is a process that the stakeholders are going to understand, right? You have to remember that the quote to cash process is really the lifeline of the business. This is how you take whatever it is you offer out into the world, whether it be a product, a service, a piece of software, and you turn it into working capital to help grow and run your business. And even whether you are the largest 1% of companies or you're a mid-sized enterprise, it is a complex process. It involves many steps, which makes it something that has tremendous opportunity for efficiency. But it also involves a number of departments. And when you start to look at traditionally how businesses looked within, it was very siloed. Looking at it on a department by department basis. When you look at the quote to cash process, you're really removing those silos because you have a number of different organizations that particular thing that you're analyzing in terms of processing a sales order goes across. You know, you're talking sales teams. Maybe it's a deal desk that's involved, order management, production and shipping, accounts receivable, and it may be more than that. So there's a lot of moving pieces involved in the quote to cash process from an internal steps perspective, from an external steps perspective, from departments, and even from systems, right? You may have an ERP system involved and a CRM, but you may have an ERP, a CRM, a configure price quote tool, a different type of quoting tool or sales order management tool. There are a number of different pieces of data that you have to configure as well. So when you bundle all those things up, not only does it create a great opportunity to drive efficiency within your business, but as importantly, it creates a number of opportunities for things to get stuck, right? When you look at credit holds, shipping holds, approvals, partial shipments, all things that negatively impact the process, the quote to cash really has it all. So there are so many tangible benefits that a business can have, which is what makes it a great project for process mining software.
Yeah, with all the economic uncertainty you talked about before, it's more important than ever to have benefits for a project you're going to take on. So what are some of those tangible benefits that process mining can provide in quote to cash?
You know, let's take a step back because this is probably one of my favorite topics, not only in quote to cash, but really in any process improvement project. Having sat on the other side and operated a business, it's really about how do we translate what this means. You know, as an industry, we talk about things like bottlenecks, inefficiencies, process conformance, process variance and deviations. But those are very process engineer or process excellence individual type of language, right? They don't translate to the business. So when we talk about tangible benefits as to why we take these types of projects on, I think it's imperative for anyone that's joined us today to understand that they need to be able to translate those into business language and what matters to the business, right? Not just say, hey, we're going to remove bottlenecks, because not all executives that are going to sponsor a project are going to understand what that really means. So when we talk about these things, translate them to business language. We're going to help improve cash flow, right? And they're going to say how, but when you're able to be more efficient with your quoting process, you get it in the customer's hands faster, your sales manage or your order management process, where you can process that order faster, you can get into production faster, and you get to the point where you're billing the customer faster. you can significantly truncate that cycle of being able to turn an order into cash flow for the business. And that the business understands, right? Reducing the amount of requotes in your quoting portion of that process reduces customer friction and increases customer satisfaction, right? So you're not having to chase a customer for, hey, did we get this right? Do we need to correct this? Processing your sales orders faster, obviously, as we discussed, translates into it. Reducing back and forth and corrections is part of that process. Getting sales orders into your production and shipping faster so they can plan better, right? How do we take Daniel's order, or maybe multiple orders from Daniel, and bundle them into one shipment to make it more efficient for Daniel, so he's doing one receiving exercise? Improving the invoice process. How do we get the invoice in the hands of Daniel so he can issue me payment? All of those things come together as very tangible benefits to the business that you see from a process improvement exercise. You know, I'll add one more that's an interesting sort of add-on to improving your quote to cash process that we've seen, that I've personally seen in some of these projects that we've undertaken, is actually employee satisfaction. And that's something that most don't realize. You get all these very tactical benefits of turning orders into cash faster and improving customer satisfaction. But there's this offset of employee satisfaction that comes along with it. When the process is more efficient, you remove employee frustration, right? I'm not always having to fix a credit check and wait for Daniel to come back to me. I'm not always having to correct all these things and do these things that I find cumbersome and tedious. So because the business becomes more efficient, you have this degree of employee satisfaction that comes along with it, because they're not frustrated with the internal workings of your own organization.
Interesting. So, you know, it seems like a lot of the KPIs for the quote to cash process are already available in your standard BI tools. Days sales outstanding, you know, sales cycle times, things like that you talked about. What additional insight does process mining provide?
So I think the first thing, especially us as practitioners, need to understand is that process mining is new to a lot of businesses, right? So the businesses, the executives, the business analysts, they understand business intelligence. They're new to process intelligence. So it's up to us still, even in today's age, to educate them on why process intelligence over business intelligence. And there are a number of fundamental reasons, but process mining really provides a new layer of visibility, right? Those business intelligence tools can create metrics, and they can create KPIs, and they can tell you, here's your days of sales outstanding, right? But what they don't help you understand is, if I want to affect that metric, I need to know what's happening in that process to make it better. So you get a deeper layer of insight into exactly how your organization's working, and shine that spotlight, as we all talk about, on where you need to focus your time to improve that metric, right? Looking at not only the process steps, the duration between those steps, but even benefits like root cause analysis, right? That are built into process mining products that allow you to then go in and really see, not only do I have a delay here, but what specifically is causing that delay so I can take action.
So as soon as, let's say we take on this project for quote to cash process mining, what are the critical factors towards success of that project?
So we always talk about data. Data is always going to be, whenever you are using data to garner insights around anything, data is a sort of your first hurdle that you have to tackle. So getting the right data, making sure that the data is accurate, and leveraging tools that are out there. Are there connectors available? Can you enrich the data and transform the data? Because sometimes that data is messy, right? Or sometimes there are certain pieces of the data that you have that you need to develop other insights, things like payment timeliness. So data is a huge first thing that we need to look at. Another thing when you think about success is, remember that a lot of businesses are new to this, right? As we discussed, new to process excellence in general. So you start talking about, hey, what's an acceptable quote to cash cycle time? this might be the first time that they have ever seen that. So you have to remember that in any one of these projects, you have to step them into these insights, right? But typically they will start with, there needs to be a challenge or a problem that the business is looking to solve, right? That there is a vested interest in solving. Remember that when you open up Pandora's box, which is uncovering an end-to-end process that the business has never seen before, there's a lot to take in, right? So helping them understand what the metrics mean, helping them understand where they should start, and starting with their own problem, and then potentially exploring other process improvement opportunities, I think is very important. One of the other big things that I talk with a lot of our customers and interested parties about as well is benchmarking. And when you talk about success, I'm not a big fan of that, because it's very difficult to benchmark businesses, right? Daniel, you might sell bicycles, I might sell bicycles, but you make yours in North America. I may have a third party make mine and then ship it from another area of the world. So to benchmark our cycle times sometimes is not really a great comparison. I usually tell businesses the best place to focus on is, where are you at today? Let's set the level. And then how do you start to improve that? How do you make that 20% improvement, 10% improvement that makes your business run better? And I find that's a very critical factor towards success, is helping them understand, what do these metrics and KPIs mean? How do we affect them? How do they tie into tangible business benefits? And how do we benchmark against ourselves so that we can track these improvements?
And then you mentioned data as one of the critical factors. Is it sensitive data that companies may not want in the cloud?
Daniel, I would say it really depends. Different organizations approach data differently. So your organization could say, we don't deem this data as sensitive. We've anonymized customer names, vendor names, or other things. Where my organization could look at that same data and say, this is extremely sensitive. So, one of the things as we look at a quote to cash improvement project to consider is that cloud is being touted everywhere across the globe within every business, immensely beneficial, but not necessarily the right decision for all companies, right? It's right for some, not for all. So for some, it's better to keep the data local and bring the process mining to the data. And that decision really will vary across business. And we've seen it ourselves that it is really very much a business decision. Even in the same industry, different businesses have different regulations. And for the audience, I'll tell you one thing, there will be nothing that will kill a potentially very beneficial process mining and process improvement project than trying to fight the battle of approvals to get the data uploaded into the cloud. And sometimes it's not whether it's the right thing or the wrong thing, but if you have to continually fight these internal walls and break down walls over and over again about getting next layer approval, typically the project sponsor, project owner starts to lose steam as too many of those walls are put in front of them, and then the project falls apart. So I'd say it's not necessarily a data sensitivity situation, because if you're dealing with a vendor, they are SOC 2 compliant and have all the data security requirements, but it's really, what is the best decision for your customer to make them successful in their efforts?
Awesome. So shift gears a little bit. As you're going after and starting a quote to cash or process mining for quote to cash project, it looks like it goes across a lot of departments. Who from the business should be involved in the project?
Yeah, I'd say, it starts with one simple critical piece, which is you got to have a project owner. Is that your business analyst? Is that your business head? Is that a head of operations? Is that a project manager? You got to have someone who's going to drive the project forward, right? Because we're going to uncover all kinds of opportunities to improve the business, and we want to make progress. And that's how you turn a project into tangible benefit. But I always tell people, don't leave it with just one individual, right? Because process mining helps you look at this process as a whole, but there are also specific benefits to each department. And you can get those departmental buy-ins as well as you move along, right? So you have one understanding the process as a whole, but maybe your order management wants to look at their part of the process and start monitoring it, right? And understanding what's happening and getting notifications as SLAs are being missed or as issues occur. So you can have a tangible benefit to each one of those departments while looking at it as a whole. So we usually recommend that you have a combination of both.
Gotcha. What I didn't hear you recommend is a center of excellence. Do you have to have a center of excellence to successfully implement process mining?
The centers of excellence, I would say, can be immensely beneficial. But like the cloud, they are not the right decision for all businesses. It really depends on what the project is, what the entire laundry list of projects for that business are, and what's the right application. You know, while centers of excellence can be immensely beneficial, they're not necessarily for every mid-enterprise or frankly, even every large enterprise class customer, because you'd have to remember that when you take on any project, including a process improvement project, there's an expectation from the business of a return on investment. And if the amount of resources that you have to pile into that project becomes too costly, at the end of the project, you end up really struggling to be able to justify that return. So I always caution businesses that it really depends on how much they want to invest in a project or multiple projects and making the right decision along the way. And if there is the opportunity to do it in a more efficient basis, then no, I don't believe that all businesses do need a center of excellence in order to have massive amount of success. And we've seen that personally.
So if you're not going to have a dedicated center of excellence, once a company generates the insights, how do they traditionally operationalize those insights?
Yeah, so as important as it is to understand the process, it's just as important to operationalize what you're doing. And that is leveraging whatever solution of choice you've made, and hopefully there are some proactive elements to it. Notifications, alerts, alarms, all these things that they can put as a constant level and constant monitoring process within it. So if you think about doing a process improvement project, you're going to discover all kinds of insights, opportunities, you're going to start to take steps to action them. But while they're occurring, turn on these proactive measures so that you're not perpetuating the problem while you're putting in the steps to drive efficiency in the background. So notify managers when SLAs are at risk, right? Send email alerts of cases that need to be addressed. All these things can be put in place to operationalize while you're taking on the process improvement project as a whole. The other benefit of operationalizing it is that you don't slip back into old habits, right? You make these fixes, they work great for a year, year and a half, and then all of a sudden things start to slow down again. Now you're constantly monitoring it and it becomes more of a continuous improvement effort within the business.
And then let's say we want to go and start this project. We're going to need buy-in from the executives. How do we go get executive buy-in?
Yeah. So again, this is crucial to any project. And let's rewind to what I said earlier in the start of this chat, which is first and foremost, translate process language to business language, right? Help them understand what are the tangible benefits they're going to get, not just we're going to remove bottlenecks, but we're going to figure out how we improve our sales order processing by 20%, which will translate to faster cash in the bank. And tie it to corporate initiatives, right? The easiest way to get executive buy-in is to figure out what the priorities are within the organization and figure out how process improvement can help with those, right? How can it help with, we want to streamline our shipping receiving because it seems to be a problem. You know, we keep getting stuck and everything is bottlenecked at our order entry. So how do we look at that? But take the language that they're giving you, which are the corporate initiatives, and help translate how process improvement and process mining can help push those projects forward. And that will give you a tremendous amount of executive buy-in, right? When you start talking about this project and these tools can help us improve cash flow, right? That's going to get the executives' attention and help get sign off for your project.
Awesome. So we're wrapping up. We have a few minutes left and have quite a few questions from the audience. So let's take a few of those if that works for you.
That's perfect. Shoot away.
So here's one that directly ties to the last question. Do you have any templates or other content to help articulate business value?
We do. So as part of our onboarding and project documents, we provide our customers with a whole laundry list of useful things. And one of those are what we call business value templates, right? Which help translate what they've discovered, how they see it, and what the actions are into what the business gets from taking those actions. And in a lot of cases, tangible dollars, right? And that when they present it to a business and say, hey, it's going to cost us a few person hours to do this project, but we see $650,000 a year in operational savings, you're going to get buy-in a lot easier. So we provide a lot of those templates to help make it easier for the individuals taking on these projects.
We have one from Ricardo from the beginning of the presentation. He says, I believe mindzie is the second big wave from process mining companies and solutions. How does mindzie differentiate from other solutions?
You know, that's probably something that would take me longer than a minute to explain, but we've taken a very unique approach. So not only developing the technology to ingest data and transform it into process logs so that our business users can get started early, but very unique approach to what we call log enrichment, which allows us to clean data, transform data, and classify data, right? And the pre-classification has tremendous value when it comes to how that data gets analyzed. So we can classify it against your own data for performance, for conformance rules, and translate business logic to classify case activities. So then when you look at the process map or start doing process analysis, we can understand and translate it to business logic, as I said. So what's fast? What's slow? Show me my really slow cases that have conformance issues. And you get all kinds of these other interesting insights. And then we've layered that with an analysis capability that uses low-code building blocks. So our concept is really to enable what we call the citizen process miner. We really want to enable more people to be able to leverage process mining and garner insights. And with our low-code building blocks, it provides that balance of sort of advanced user flexibility, but also enabling people who are just getting started to see tangible benefits.
Awesome. Another question. So he says, would you suggest the use of process mining for a quote to cash process in a small company? So maybe you can talk a little bit about the size of companies that could use process mining for quote to cash.
Yeah, let's just say there's a lower end limit without a doubt, right? If you get a two-man shop, there's not much you can do to improve that process. But I think the industry underestimates how powerful this cross-departmental view of potential efficiencies can be, even to what I would deem as smaller organizations. So once you start talking about companies that are 20, 30, 40, $50 million in revenue, there are a lot of moving pieces. And these are insights that they can leverage. And when you talk about some of the other benefits of process mining, like proactive monitoring, right? So I'm a small business, I don't have a lot of resources. I need Daniel to know ahead of time. Predictive analytics that can tell you and warn you of things that are going to happen. There are a lot of tangible benefits even to smaller organizations.
Excellent. Many thanks for such a great conversation, James and Daniel. And I would like to remind our viewers that the next session will start now, and you'll be able to join it from the lobby page. Many thanks, and I'll see you there.
Thank you, everyone.